So I was going through some of my old video footage the other day and realized that about a year ago I built a box, shot the whole process, and never edited it. But since I'm in the middle of doing a makeover on the shop, it ended up working out perfect, so I edited this week's video for you guys. So let's take a look at building this custom ported subwoofer enclosure for a 10-inch Alpine Type R in a Subaru WRX. In order to begin my build, I'm going to start with looking at my blueprints. Having a custom subwoofer box will really get the best performance out of your subwoofer, but the math for a custom box can be difficult. So if you're in need of a blueprint with all the dimensions, I have custom designs for sale on my website. Just click the link in the upper right hand corner. Now that I have dimensions, I can start with marking out the dimensions of each board onto the wood. For this, I'm actually using this cool tape measure that makes a line as I scribe it along the wood. There's a link for this and everything else used in the video in the upper right hand corner as well. Here I'm using my table saw to cut the board to size. If you do not have a table saw, a circular saw or even a jigsaw is a great low cost option for making these cuts. And if you use a guide rail, they can be just as straight. Now to save some time, you can see here I now have all my boards cut ready for some detail work. I need to start with marking out my detail cuts. First I start with marking out my cutout circles. Now this box actually has a double baffle, which means the baffle that holds the subwoofers is actually 2 layers of wood. One of these layers will have the normal cutout diameter of the subwoofer so that it can mount to that board, and the other will actually have a larger overall diameter cutout so the subwoofer can sit down flush. Now here's a neat trick that you can use. You can see that I'm using the Mobile Solutions circle template. None of the templates I have though are the perfect cutout diameter for the subwoofer. So I'm using this one, but I did the math to determine which offset flush trim router bit I could use to reduce this hole size to the correct size. I used the bearing from that offset flush trim bit to draw a circle so I know where to rough cut. This will make more sense in a second. I also mark out my port cutouts along with my bracing window cutouts. Over at my jigsaw cutting station, I drill holes in the corners of the cutouts and then proceed to rough cut using a jigsaw. Now I'm saving some material because I'm going to come back and make these cuts perfect with a router. If you do not own a router, a jigsaw and a steady hand can work great. At the router, I'm starting with an offset flush trim bit that I mentioned earlier. If you're unfamiliar with a router, it basically spins a bit that cuts while a bearing at the top of the bit rides along of a surface. I now stick the Mobile Solutions Smart template to the baffle piece using double-sided template tape. This holds the template in position while I cut. Avoid using foam tape because foam tape can cause the template to shift while cutting, and the edge won't be perfect. As you can see here, using a router really makes a nice clean edge. And check out that camera angle. Now my cutout hole is the perfect size for the subwoofer. For the rest of my router work, I switched to a flush trim bit where the bearing is the exact same size as the cutting flutes, thus perfectly matching the profile of the template. Here I am now cutting the outer baffle that has the larger hole that will go around the outer diameter of the subwoofer. And oh boy, little 7-pound, 8.5 ounce baby Jesus, that is a sweet camera angle. I'm doing this more in the future, hallelujah. For the porthole itself, I'm using this cool tool which allows me to adjust to the size of the hole. You could also use 4 sticks of wood cut straight to the right size. Finally, for the brace, I'm using this smart template shape which is called the inverse. I could make these cuts straight, no one's ever going to see this brace anyways, but hey, why not? Finally, before I change out my flush trim bit, I copy the porthole profile, this way it matches perfectly on both of the front baffles. Now all the cuts are perfect, so now I can switch out my router bit and do a little bit of edge profiling, and then we'll move on to final assembly. One of the first things I like to do is load in a rabbiting bit, which will make a little notch on the side pieces of the box. This comes in handy later for tucking the carpet into the sides of the boxes so that it has a perfect cut transition. Next I load in a roundover bit. I use this to round over any edges the air could flow over in the box, things like the edges of the brace, the end of the port, and the port entrance. This gives the box a more finished look. For the port entrance, I intentionally go a little deep into the wood. This again gives me a perfect hard edge that I can cut the carpet on later. Now that the edge profiling is done, it's time for assembly. I always start with assembling the back, bottom, and sides first. This is a great time to check fitment within the vehicle. Do not be a dope and build the whole box and then check. After building those 4 walls, I start working on my port assembly. I always cover each surface completely with glue and then brad nail it into position. You could also use screws, but if you do, be sure to pre-drill the holes first. The strength in the joint comes from using plenty of glue contacting each surface, so just be sure to use plenty of glue. I finish up my port assembly with nailing the brace in position. Now I can add the port assembly to the box, and also note I chase each seam with a bead of glue to ensure that everything is airtight. If your cuts are not accurate, make sure that you fill in any voids with caulk. Next I attach the first baffle on the box. I of course spread the glue and then nail it into position. Before attaching the second baffle, I coat the whole surface in glue and then apply. Now that the second baffle is attached, I'm going to do some light detail work on the front of this box to give it a cool look. Since this is going in a WRX, I picked a shape that had some hard lines that sort of matches the front grille of the car. I start with using templates to sketch this onto the front of the box. Next, I stick the templates in position and then carefully use a handheld router to cut the design onto the wood. I use the inner template to actually make the shape, and the outside one is just there to support the router so it doesn't tip. Now as I'm editing this, I just realized I didn't film the carpet wrapping process, but this is shown in some of my previous videos. In this case, I just used those grooves to tuck the carpet and to show that design accent. So there we have it, our finished box. Drop me a comment down below and let me know what you guys think. Also, I wanted to tell you guys about the CarAudioFabrication weekly training program email list. I put together an email list that you guys can sign up for where I send out weekly tips and tricks. So if you enjoyed these videos and you would like to learn a little bit more, be sure to join by clicking down below. A special thanks goes out to my Patreon supporters, Brian, Eddie, Ali, EJ, Rory, Truman, Emmanuel, and Jerry, along with the rest of the Patreon support team. YouTube ad revenue continues to be less and less every month, so these guys help with small donations per video, which helps me to afford the overhead cost of making this content. To support the making of this content, please consider joining at the Patreon link down below. As a matter of fact, most people have probably left this video by now, so if you're still here, that tells me that you're a super fan, and I would really love to meet you and have your support. If you don't have the funds, no big deal, that's cool too. I'm just glad that you're here watching, and if you can smash that like button, that's appreciated as well. Thank you again for watching.